Greetings, folks. Welcome to another one of our free Friday community classes right here on the Green Art channel. I post these classes every single Friday covering a pretty massive array of topics that focus on walking the plant spirit path. This week, I'm really excited to be sharing some wisdom from one of my favorite teachers, Paul Beyerl. And in his book, the Master Book of Herbalism, he ends kind of the juicy bit of the book by sharing these 13 laws of the traditional herbalist. And they have been really incredible at being kind of a guiding force for me in my own work. I studied with Paul before his passing in 2021 and continue to study his material through Hermit's Grove. He's just somebody who has been such a big part of why I do what I do and how I do it. So I'm really excited to share these 13 laws with you today. So we will be doing just a very brief biography of Paul. I have another video that I'll link in the details below all about him. So if you are new to him, please take a moment and go watch that class afterwards. There's a lot of really good stuff in there. And then we will talk about why these kinds of laws, these kinds of virtues are important in our work. And then we are going to go through all 13 laws one at a time. So it should be a lot of fun. So first, Paul Beyerl, he was born in 1945 in Wisconsin and is probably most known for his books, right? He wrote, of course, the Master Book of Herbalism, which we will be referencing material from today. He wrote the Compendium of Herbal Magic, which, for me, those two books are essential. If they're not on your bookshelf, they need to be. And he also wrote the Holy Books of the Devas. And this is a very, very beautiful book exploring the personhood of plants, the spirit of plants through lore, through story. And it really is just an unsung and underrated, or sometimes not rated at all, addition to Western plant spirit path work. So all of his books, are worth reading for folks who walk a Wiccan path. Paul was the founder of the Lothorian tradition, and he wrote an incredible book called A Wiccan Bardo, which you can find a revised version now online. Very incredible for folks who walk a Wiccan path, but also work with plant spirits, right? He really was very much into that. And before, really up until his passing in 2021, he was quite active on YouTube and was posting a lot of videos and doing a lot of things there. And he is, of course, the founder and magister of the Hermit's Grove, which is an incredible Western path of plant medicine, herbal medicine. So really somebody who I consider to be an exceptional Herbwise ancestor. He remains very active in the lives of the folks who do this work through his books, through his magical tradition, his mystery school. And I will link to all of that stuff below so that if you feel inspired by his style, you can go get to know him a little bit more. Highly recommended. So first, let's talk about virtues increasing harmony. So when people see laws and rules, ethics and virtues, sometimes they scoff a little bit. A lot of people who come to earth-centered, nature-centered, pagan, druid, sorceress, crafty traditions are coming out of religions where there's a lot of dogma, there's a lot of hard and fast morality that really doesn't suit the individual. So sometimes our hackles will go up a little bit and we'll say, this feels weird, right? But the virtues, when we talk about the virtues, whether they're the classic 9 virtues of modern druidry or the virtues of Asatru, or in this case, the laws of the traditional herbalist, these are not shoulds and musts, right? What they are guideposts. They're virtues that when we align to them, we increase the likelihood that we are going to behave harmoniously. We increase the likelihood that our thoughts, words, and deeds and the response we get from the world around us will be a harmonious one. So if we aren't following them to the letter, if we aren't following them to the spirit, It's not like bad things are going to happen to us. We're going to be punished. That's not the mood or the sentiment of this kind of stuff at all. So if you have any kind of trepidation around that, once we get into it, I think you'll see, oh, these are here to inspire me, to help me do better, to help me constantly grow and be more, and to make sure that the way that I show up for my work, whatever it looks like, is as exceptional as possible. So before we get started on the laws, a couple of notes. First, I have not written them out exactly verbatim as they appear in the Master Book of Herbalism. Partly because some of them are a little bit wordy and I wanted to save time, partly because I just wanted to present the information in a way that encourages people to go buy that book and read it for themselves. I have also taken the creative liberty of creating gender neutrality in all of the laws, right? A lot of them are gender specific, not because they were intended to be that way, but he was just writing using, he, him pronouns. So I've taken all of that out to make it more accessible to everybody. And then there are some things in these laws that I don't agree with, or things that I maybe see differently than Paul did. And I think that in my communications with him and my work with him over the years, there was never any kind of pushback about that. There was never any kind of, if you don't see it my way, you're doing it wrong. The discussions were always open and adaptable and inspired. And so as we come up to laws that maybe I have a slightly different take on, I'm going to share that with you right as we go, because that way these will align to other things we've spoken about in other classes. So I'd like to keep some cohesion there. So let's get to the 13 laws of the traditional herbalist as written by Paul Beyerl, presented first in the Master Book of Herbalism. Law 1. The traditional herbalist is aware of all four elements. There is no facet of their work which does not invoke the power of earth, water, fire, and air. Now, if you know anything about Paul, you know that he was very much a tried and true Western herbalist, astrology, and an astrologer. Astrology was a big part of how he practiced, and he very much had that influence of Hermetic principles and the ways of Empedocles, and the four elements show up distinctly in his work. And this is one of the reasons why I reference his books so much, is that while I do not practice any form of astrology, I do work a 4-element model in my assessment and my protocols and my formulary and my clinical herbal work. So I really appreciate this particular law because it reminds us that we are surrounded by fundamental building blocks, the 4 elements of earth, water, air, and fire. Of course, they manifest in their physical forms that we all know: soil, river, wind, flame, right? But they are more than that. They are powers. They are source powers that are the warp and weft of the universe. Everything that exists is made up of some combination of all 4, not necessarily a balance of all 4, which we'll talk about balance as we go on, but a combination, right? Everyone's their own unique recipe of these 4 primordial elements. And the 5th, the quintessence, the spirit, which is the tie that binds. And so Paul begins the laws by saying that the traditional herbalist is aware of all 4 elements, and that there's no facet of their work which does not invoke those powers, right? And what he's saying here is that we have to become aware that every manifestation of disease and disharmony is a manifestation of a disharmony of the elements, right? That everything that happens is either an excess of fire or a deficiency in water, or too windy a condition, or too cold and earthy a condition. This, in my opinion, was Paul's way of bringing energetics into his work, right? And so not only are the 4 elements essential for us to be aware of, but their power is crucial for us to understand what we're doing and how we should be doing it. Law 2. The more wise the practitioner, the better the balance they will keep. knowing always the Hermetic principle, as above, so below, as one soweth, so shall they reap. So here we see some Hermetic philosophy coming into Paul's work. And I personally do not use the term balance. I think that balance is a disease state, right? When things are balanced, they are precarious, they are fragile. It's very easy to knock something out of balance, and it implies that there's only one sweet spot, right? And I just don't think that's how health works. I don't think it's how magic works. I don't think it's how nature works. I prefer harmony. If I was to rewrite this law, I would say the more wise the practitioner, the better the harmony they will keep, that we are able to change and adjust and adapt to meet the different tides of nature, that what looks like balance in the winter would be, imbalance in the summer. So why don't we just move into a concept of harmony, of moving through things in a harmonious way? Knowing always that the Hermetic principle, as above, so below, as one soweth, they shall reap, that everything we do influences everything else. And he'll cover this more deeply in another law, that everything that we cultivate within ourselves changes the world that we live in, that everything that we do in the world around us changes our internal landscape, and that there's no way for us to do anything without affecting the whole of things. Law 3, all creation is a balance of the four elements, and a remedy of the herbalist must be in balance. Again, I personally would change this to harmony, again, because I don't think that any one of us is a perfect balance of all four elements. I think that it is our nature that some of us are a little more fiery, some of us, like yours truly, a little more airy, some of us are very earthy, some of us are very watery, and that is our superpower, right? If we look at the Prakriti and Vikriti concepts of Ayurveda, for example, right, that we all have an innate nature that is a combination of the tridoshas in a very specific way. I think we can absolutely be inspired by that. So if I were to reword this, I would say that all creation is a harmony of the four elements. All four elements, earth, air, fire, and water, working harmoniously together, not necessarily in equal amounts, but even if one is stronger, they all play well together. And the remedy of the herbalist must also be in harmony. Harmony within the formula. The formula has to be written in a way that is innately harmonious, right? Beautifully harmonious on its own. But then the formula has to be harmonious to the individual who will be working with the formula. And this is why in traditional herbalism, while we do sometimes lean on established broad spectrum and patent formulas, our focus is always to write a formula for each individual person, right? To ensure that harmony is there. Lesson 4, the wise practitioner will only work good. The remedies will only be made to restore health and well-being, letting the reward being in that creation of good, right? So this is very important to Paul, especially as an academic, as somebody who really understood the history and the ways of witchcraft, and somebody who was a practitioner of Wicca, that the work was always done to create good, to create cosmos, to create things that are beautiful and harmonious and things fitting together in a pleasing way. The remedies only to be made to restore health and well-being and nothing else. And he'll cover another side of this law in another law later on. Letting the reward being in that creation of good, right? That the greatest reward from the work is in the creation of goodness, in the doing things to add to the goodness of the world, to create more harmony in the world, whether that's through creating more goodness and harmony within the self, which affects the whole, or doing more external work to create goodness in the world, right? Very important. Law 5. The poisons of the trade must only be used to suffocate and dispel that which causes harm to a fellow creature, that which keeps them from seeking their peace and happiness, right? So here is an awareness that the poison plants and the poison path has been part of our trade since forever, that it is an essential part of traditional herbalism, but that the poison allies are only employed to suffocate and dispel that which causes harm rather than to cause harm directly, right? It's a slightly nuanced concept. But that we are working with these plants because when we work with them in the right way, they have a very unique and particular ability to help folks find freedom, peace, and happiness. Law 6, there must never be employed any concoction which would impair, injure, or interfere with anyone or anything. The creation of harm is not your realm. This is really one of the more only really dogmatic rule, and it is not in its spirit dogmatic, but it can read that way, that Paul is saying, in my opinion, when you practice traditional herbalism, the cunning arts, right? That the creation of harm isn't our goal. It's not our work. There may be some people for whom that is their work. We're not those people, right? There's no judgment being put on those people. That's just not us. That we are not here to impair, injure, or interfere. We are here to heal, empower, and create joy and freedom, right? They are just different intents, which is very important in the work. Law 7, the traditional herbalist will always find a way to work with the universe. No matter what their religion, their gods and the universe are the same, right? So whether one is practicing a particular spiritual path, a particular religion, working with particular cultic practices, deities, ancestors, land spirits, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. What matters is that we will always try to work with the universe. We will always try to work towards cosmos, towards harmony, towards love. And that whatever the specific nuances and idiosyncrasies and trappings of our spiritual paths may be, they're all part of the same power. They are all drawn from the same well. They are all cooked in the same cauldron. And so our focus should be on our goals of creating good, with everything else being supportive of that. Law 8, and so they practice conservation in all they do, never taking more than is to be used, never taking anything without something being left behind, rewarding the earth with a gift or a blessing. Here is a law that conceals animism, right? That conservation is essential, that by protecting and stewarding the land, we are protecting and stewarding ourselves, that when we take more than we need, we rob from others and we break the pact of personhood that humans should have with the land. Never taking anything without something being left behind, never leaving a vacuum, always making an offering, always expressing gratitude. To me, this law inspires deep ecology and personal responsibility for stewardship, that however you engage with the plants, you become fully responsible for ensuring that those plants are protected, that they are properly harvested, that they are nurtured and respected, and that we are always participating in the ritual of sacred reciprocity, that whenever we receive, we always return with a blessing. Law 9, because they follow the universal laws of conservation, the traditional herbalist will never bring harm to plant, person, nor to earth and water, and will stir the fires of creation only to work good. So here is a summation of a lot of the laws that have come before, right? This one is one of my favorites. Because they follow the universal laws of conservation, only taking what we need, participating in sacred reciprocity, being in personal relationship with the plants we work with, the traditional herbalist will never bring harm to plant, person, nor to the earth and the water, right? There's no ability for us to harm what we love, and will stir the fires of creation only to work for good. This is one worth memorizing. Law 10, because they practice their craft within both the smallest laws of the universe and the greatest laws, even to gaze at the stars is to be aware. I really love this one. It makes me think of sitting with a plant or gazing at the stars or watching the moon, sometimes being enough, sometimes being all it takes to remind us of our part in all of this, that we are all connected, that there is a profound amount of beauty in the world that we can focus on, and that how we show up makes changes, right? How we show up is important. That even for a small human person like us to gaze at the stars is to enter into a state of awareness. And he may even have been nudging at this concept that I talk about a lot, where when we walk through the world with this animist perspective, when we walk through the world, as Graham Harvey says, living in a world filled with persons, only some of them are human, that choice to live in that world alters our consciousness, right? It slightly alters how we perceive and what we are able to perceive. And it does generate awareness, right? So it's possible. I wish that Paul was still here for me to ask him. It's possible that he may have been nudging and winking in that direction. Law 11. The practitioner finds themselves following the pattern of the moon, the patterns of astrology, the patterns of the universe, even before they are completely able to comprehend. That folks who are called into this work are called into the spirituality of nature before they have a name for it. And this is why we see so many people say, when I found herbalism, when I found druidry, when I found paganism, when I found this or this, it felt like coming home. It felt like somebody giving a name to something I've always felt and always tried to express, but didn't have the framework for. We see this a lot with animism when folks first hear this term, this anthropological term anyway, of animism. They go, oh my God, I didn't know there was a word for how I experience the world, right? So before we even know what to call ourselves, before we get wrapped up in the isms, there is a natural drive to engage with the world in these ways and to acknowledge and try to participate, right? Which is very beautiful. Law 12, sorry. And they know from doing that everything that happens affects everything else. So this is a reference to an earlier law, right? That it is impossible for us to do any action, especially a powerful action of beauty done in ritual with intent, without affecting everything else. We cannot work on healing ourselves within through herbal medicine, for example, and not see changes ripple out into our narrative, into our life path. Similarly, we cannot create good in the world externally without seeing it change our inner world and other people and the kinds of things that start being drawn to our path. Nature abhors a vacuum, right? Classic saying that it is impossible to pluck any string on the web of life without the entire web receiving the sound, right? So this is a very important thing for us to carry in our hearts. And I say a lot, spiritual herbalism, traditional herbalism gives us permission to be selfish because we are aware that as we heal ourselves, as we reconcile our hurts, our traumas, our fears, our pains, the patterns that we understand are not us, we are also doing goodness in the wholeness of the world. If we look at Lovelock's Gaia theory, for example, every being on the planet being as a cell in the body of the Mother Earth, how can we create individual cellular health without creating health in the wholeness of the body, right? This is very important. And last but not least, Law 13. The traditional herbalist learns from their craft, for the act of doing will bring about even greater knowledge, even if it is difficult to put into words. Paul was through and through a ritualist, and you will see this on his YouTube videos. You will read this in his books, that action is poetry in motion, right? That when we do, we embody. And that by doing that, we learn more about ourselves and about the work and about the world, even in ways that are sometimes hard to conceptualize, sometimes hard to really write about or journal about or explain to other people. We get a knowing that's bone-based, right? It's down in our blood. And this is important. We see time and time again that these earth-centered, animistic, land-focused traditions of our various collective ancestors are far more about what we do, how we show up, than what we think or what we believe. Again, referring to that other law where who your gods are and what your religion are doesn't mean as much as how you show up and what you do to create goodness and beauty, right? It's very interesting. So a beautiful law to end with that I think really sums up that at the end of a book, right? This is towards the end of the Master Book of Herbalism. He's saying, okay, stop reading, go do, go connect, right? So hopefully that was interesting for you, a nice introduction to the spirit and the teachings of Paul Beyerl. Again, I encourage you wholeheartedly to go out and start collecting his books, find him on YouTube, see what is left from this most venerated of Herbwise ancestors. His wisdom is very, very important for those of us doing this type of work, and grateful endlessly. Thanks so much for being here, for journeying through these laws with me. I'll see you next time.